I'm Mabel, 57 years old, and for 32 years, I thought I had the perfect marriage with James. Our anniversary celebration was supposed to be magical, but instead I watched my husband dance with his young colleague Natalie like I was invisible. I became nothing more than a situation he needed to handle, so I made a decision that would change everything. Let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button as I share how I went from being invisible to becoming untraceable, along with every secret he tried to hide. I grew up in a quaint small town in Virginia where everyone knew each other's business and life moved at the pace of sweet tea being poured on a hot summer day. My parents raised me with traditional values: work hard, be kind, and family comes first. Those principles shaped me into the woman I am today, though I've certainly redefined what family comes first means over the years. I met James during my sophomore year at the University of Virginia. He was this ambitious business major with a magnetic smile and big dreams that made my heart flutter. I was studying library sciences, fascinated by information systems and archiving. We met at the university library, where I worked part-time. He came in frantically searching for materials for a business presentation. I helped him find exactly what he needed, and he asked me out for coffee as a thank you. That coffee date turned into dinner, which turned into countless study sessions, which eventually turned into 32 years of marriage. Looking back, I see the pattern established even then, me helping him shine, supporting his goals being the foundation upon which he could build his success. After graduation, we married in a beautiful ceremony with all our family and friends present. I still remember my father's proud face as he walked me down the aisle, whispering that James was a lucky man. I felt lucky too, starting this adventure with someone I truly believed was my partner in all things. The early years were happy. We were young in love and building our life together. James started in an entry-level position at a financial services company, while I secured a job as an assistant librarian at the local university. I loved my work organizing information, helping researchers, and preserving important documents. There was something deeply satisfying about being the keeper of knowledge, the person who could navigate complex systems and find exactly what was needed. Our first move came 3 years into our marriage when James was offered a promotion in Philadelphia. It meant leaving my job, but I didn't hesitate. His career was taking off, and I was proud to support him. I found another position at a public library there, though it wasn't quite as fulfilling as my university role. 2 years later, Sophia came into our world, our beautiful, headstrong daughter who had her father's charm and my love of books. Being a mother changed everything. I scaled back my hours at the library to care for her. When Daniel was born 2 years after that, I scaled back even further. James's career continued its upward trajectory, requiring longer hours and more travel. It made sense for me to be the steady presence at home. We moved 2 more times for James's career, to Chicago, then finally to Connecticut, when he was offered a senior executive position at the company headquarters. Each move meant starting over for me professionally, taking increasingly smaller roles to accommodate our family's needs. By the time we settled in our beautiful colonial home in the Connecticut suburbs, I was working just 1 day a week at the local library, focusing primarily on being the perfect wife and mother. Our home became the showcase for James's success. 5 bedrooms, a manicured lawn, a kitchen where I prepared elaborate meals for his business associates. I coordinated our social calendar, managed the household, and made sure our children had everything they needed to thrive. James would often introduce me at company functions as the real secret to my success, and I believe that our partnership, though traditional in its division of labor, was equal in its value. The years flew by in a whirlwind of school events, family vacations, and career milestones, most of them James's. Before I knew it, Sophia was graduating college and pursuing a law degree, while Daniel was finishing his business degree at his father's alma mater. Our nest emptied, leaving James and me alone in the house that had once bustled with activity. That's when I first noticed the shift. With the children gone, the silence between James and me grew louder. He stayed at the office later, traveled more frequently, and seemed perpetually distracted when home. I tried to recapture his attention, taking cooking classes to prepare new dishes, suggesting weekend getaways, even redecorating our bedroom to create a more romantic atmosphere. He would smile appreciatively, but remained emotionally distant, his mind clearly elsewhere. I told myself it was normal for long marriages to go through phases. We were adjusting to being just the two of us again. James was at the peak of his career, handling tremendous responsibility. I needed to be patient, understanding. So when our 32nd anniversary approached, I saw it as the perfect opportunity to reconnect. I would plan a celebration to remind us both of the journey we'd taken together, of all we'd built and shared. I booked the Grand Windsor Hotel's ballroom, the most elegant venue in town, and invited 100 of our closest friends, family members, and James's business associates. I spent weeks perfecting every detail, the menu, the music, the decor. I wanted everything to be as special as our wedding day had been. Little did I know that this celebration wouldn't mark a renewal of our marriage, but the beginning of its end. The weeks leading up to our anniversary celebration were filled with anticipation. I wanted everything to be perfect, a reminder of what James and I had built together over 3 decades. I bought a new dress for the occasion, a deep burgundy gown that made me feel beautiful, despite the extra pounds and wrinkles that 57 years had given me. I scheduled appointments for hair, makeup, and even treated myself to a spa day, something I rarely did. I found a special gift for James, too, a rare first edition of his favorite classic business book that I tracked down through my librarian connections. I had it beautifully bound and inscribed with a personal message about our journey together. I imagined his face lighting up when he opened it, recognizing the thoughtfulness behind it. James seemed distracted whenever I mentioned the party preparations, but I attributed it to work pressure. His company was in the midst of a major merger, and as chief financial officer, he carried significant responsibility. "Just handle it however you want, Mabel," he'd say when I asked for input on menu choices or music selection. "I trust your judgment completely." Once that would have felt like a compliment. Now it felt like dismissal. Still, I hoped our anniversary celebration would be a turning point, a chance to reconnect, to remind ourselves of what we meant to each other beyond the roles we'd settled into. The day of the celebration arrived. The ballroom looked stunning. Soft lighting, elegant floral arrangements in our wedding colors, tables perfectly set for our guests. I arrived early to oversee the final details, my heart fluttering with nervous excitement. James was supposed to meet me there at 6 an hour before guests would arrive. 6 came and went. 6:30. At 6:45, he finally called. "Stuck in a last-minute meeting." He explained, his voice hurried. "The merger negotiations hit a snag. I'll be there as soon as possible." I swallowed my disappointment. "The guests will be arriving soon." I know. Just start without me if needed. I'll be there." He arrived 20 minutes after the first guest, looking immaculate in his tailored suit but clearly flustered. I met him at the entrance, relief washing over me. "You made it," I said, reaching to straighten his tie. "Of course I did." He kissed my cheek quickly. "Sorry for the delay. This merger is a nightmare." Throughout the cocktail hour, I noticed James checking his phone repeatedly, his attention darting around the room rather than focusing on our celebration. When I introduced him to friends we hadn't seen in years, his responses were polite but perfunctory. Then she arrived. "James, there you are?" A woman's voice, bright and confident, cut through the conversation. I turned to see a stunning woman in her early 30s approaching us. Her sleek black dress highlighted a figure that made me instantly conscious of my own softening body. Her smile was dazzling, directed entirely at my husband. James's face transformed, the distraction vanishing, replaced by a warm, engaged expression I hadn't seen directed at me in months. "Natalie, I didn't think you could make it," he said, his voice animated. "And miss celebrating the famous James Preston never." She turned to me with a practiced smile. "You must be Mabel. James talks about you all the time." The lie hung in the air between us. If James talked about me all the time, She would have known exactly who I was, not needed to guess. Natalie just joined the marketing team, James explained. She's been instrumental in positioning us for the merger. Hardly, she laughed, touching James's arm lightly. Your husband is being generous. He's the real genius behind this deal. I watched their interaction with a growing sense of unease. The way they communicated, finishing each other's sentences, referencing inside jokes, standing just slightly too close, suggested a familiarity beyond professional colleagues. Throughout dinner, I noticed James's gaze repeatedly drifting to Natalie, seated 3 tables away. When our oldest friends Robert and Anne asked about our upcoming travel plans, James responded vaguely clearly, not engaged in the conversation. When it came time for toasts, I stood and spoke from my heart about our journey together, the challenges we'd overcome, the family we'd raised, the life we'd built. I raised my glass to many more years of partnership and love, and James's return toast was generic, almost impersonal, thanking everyone for coming, acknowledging our years together with none of the specific memories or emotions I'd referenced. It felt like a business speech rather than a husband's loving tribute. After dinner, I excused myself to the ladies' room. Returning, I took a wrong turn down a hallway and froze when I heard James's distinctive laugh. Peering around the corner, I saw him and Natalie in a quiet alcove sharing a drink. They weren't touching, but the intensity between them was palpable. She has no idea, Natalie said, her voice low but audible in the quiet hallway. Let's not discuss this now, James replied, glancing around but not seeing me. Tonight is complicated. Of course, Natalie smiled, raising her glass. To complications, then. I retreated before they could spot me, my mind racing. What exactly didn't I have any idea about the merger? Something else entirely. The seed of suspicion, which had been merely a vague discomfort earlier, took root and began to grow. Back at our table, I studied James with new eyes. Had I been willfully blind? Was I seeing problems where none existed? After all, ambitious executives often work closely with their teams. Perhaps I was overreacting to normal workplace camaraderie. But as the evening progressed and the band began playing, that seed of doubt grew into something I could no longer ignore. The band started playing our wedding song, The Way You Look Tonight, and my heart lifted. Surely James would ask me to dance now. This was our moment, the perfect opportunity to reconnect amid the chaos of the celebration. I waited, smile ready, as he finished his conversation with a business associate. But instead of turning to me, James scanned the room, his eyes landing on another group. He excused himself and walked directly to where Natalie stood with some younger colleagues. I watched frozen in my seat as he leaned in to speak to her. She laughed, nodding, and then placed her hand in his as they moved to the dance floor. Not our wedding song. That had ended while I sat waiting, but still a slow, intimate melody. They moved together with disturbing familiarity. James's hand rested lower on her back than was professionally appropriate. She gazed up at him with unmasked adoration. They spoke closely, her laughter floating across the room periodically. James looked more relaxed, more engaged, more alive than he had all evening. Certainly more than when he was with me. They might as well have been alone in the room. I became invisible, not just to James, but it seemed to everyone as they watched this spectacle unfold. I sat at my table, the celebrated wife of 32 years, watching my husband dance with another woman like I was nothing. "Are you okay?" Anne appeared beside me, her face etched with concern. My oldest friend, she could always read me better than anyone. "I'm fine." I lied, unable to voice the humiliation burning through me. "Just tired from all the planning." Anne's eyes drifted to the dance floor, then back to me. "Mabel," she began carefully, "has James mentioned Natalie before?" "Just in passing," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "She's new in marketing." Anne squeezed my hand. "Let's get some air." Outside on the terrace, the cool evening breeze helped clear my head. Anne waited patiently while I collected myself. "How long has this been going on?" she finally asked. "What do you mean?" I tried to maintain the pretense, though it was crumbling rapidly. Mabel, I've known you both for 30 years. I've never seen James look at anyone the way he was looking at her. The simple truth of her statement broke something inside me. I don't know, I admitted. I didn't even know there was anything to know until tonight. When we returned inside, the dancing continued. James had partnered with several other women, appropriate dances with their friends' wives and colleagues, but his eyes kept finding Natalie. When the band announced the final set, I watched with a sickening certainty as James once again approached her. This dance was worse than the first, more intimate, more familiar. Their bodies moved closer, their conversation more intense. At one point, he whispered something that made her smile in a way that twisted my stomach into knots. I couldn't take any more. I approached them on the dance floor, forcing a pleasant expression. James, I'm getting tired. Should we start saying our goodbyes? He looked at me as though I'd interrupted something important. Already, we've barely celebrated. It's almost midnight, I pointed out. Many guests have already left. You go ahead if you're tired, he suggested, not releasing Natalie's hand. I should stay until the end to thank everyone. I stood there publicly dismissed by my husband at our own anniversary party. Natalie had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. I should mingle anyway, she said, stepping back. Thank you for the dance, James, and congratulations again on your anniversary, Mrs. Preston. Mrs. Preston, not Mabel, as though I were merely an extension of James, not a person in my own right. We should talk, I told James quietly after she walked away. About what? His tone carried an edge of irritation. About whatever is going on with you and Natalie. He scoffed, looking around to ensure no one had heard. Don't be ridiculous, Mabel. She's a colleague. We're in the middle of the most important merger of my career. Of course we're working closely together. That didn't look like work, I persisted. You're overreacting and creating a scene, he hissed. Can we please just finish our anniversary without drama? Without drama. As though my concerns were simply an inconvenience, a disruption to his evening. I stepped back, wounded by his dismissal. Fine, we'll talk tomorrow. But James had already turned away, his attention back to the room, scanning until he located Natalie again. The next morning, James slept late, while I lay awake replaying the previous night's events. When he finally headed to the shower, I did something I'd never done in 32 years of marriage. I checked his phone. The text messages between him and Natalie confirmed my worst fears. Flirtatious exchanges, references to meetings and dinners I knew nothing about, inside jokes, late-night messages sent from our bed while I slept beside him. Nothing explicitly sexual in the text I saw, but the emotional intimacy was undeniable. Worse were the emails I found. Plans for a weekend business trip to New York that coincided with a luxury hotel reservation. Discussions about finding the right time and being careful. James helping Natalie secure a promotion that would make them more aligned organizationally. When James emerged from the shower, I confronted him with what I'd found. You went through my phone. His indignation was the response of a guilty man, attacking rather than addressing the actual issue. Are you having an affair with Natalie? I asked directly. This is absurd, he deflected. She's a talented executive I'm mentoring. The company encourages these relationships. Mentoring requires hotel rooms in New York. That's a business trip for the merger. Several team members are going. Then why isn't it on our shared calendar? Why haven't you mentioned it until now? Each explanation he offered was weaker than the last. The merger preparation, the stress, the late nights required, all perfectly innocent, he insisted. I wanted to believe him. 32 years of marriage made me want to trust the man I'd built a life with. But the evidence kept mounting. Over the next few weeks, I noticed more signs. Mysterious dinner meetings, weekend work sessions, calls that he took in private. Credit card statements showed restaurant charges in towns where he supposedly hadn't been. Small gifts appeared on expense reports as client appreciation items. Each confrontation followed the same pattern: denial, defensiveness, then making me feel unreasonable for questioning him. Gaslighting, I would later learn it was called, making me doubt my own perceptions, my own reality. But reality has a way of asserting itself no matter how much someone tries to obscure it. And soon, I would face a truth so undeniable that it would shatter the foundations of everything I thought I knew about my marriage. 3 weeks after our anniversary disaster, James announced another late meeting. He kissed me distractedly on his way out the door, not meeting my eyes. "Don't wait up. This might run late." Something in his casual dismissal triggered a response I hadn't known I was capable of. I grabbed my car keys the moment his car disappeared from view and followed him at a discreet distance. Instead of heading toward the office, James drove to Bellini's, an upscale Italian restaurant in the next town over. I parked across the street waiting. 20 minutes later, Natalie arrived. I watched through the restaurant window as the hostess led her to James's table. The way his face lit up upon seeing her was like a physical blow. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, torturing myself by watching their intimate dinner. The way they leaned in toward each other, the casual touches, the complicit smiles. But it was what happened after dinner that truly broke me. I followed them to the Westbrook Hotel, a luxury establishment known for its discretion. They didn't check in. They already had a key. This wasn't their first time. I couldn't bear to follow them inside. Instead, I parked near the entrance, experiencing a strange detachment, as though watching someone else's life collapse. I called James's phone. It went straight to voicemail. "In a meeting," he had said. The lie hung in the air around me. I considered storming into the hotel, creating a scene, demanding explanations. But something kept me rooted to my seat, perhaps the last shreds of dignity I was desperate to preserve. 2 hours later, they emerged. I slunk down in my car, though they were too absorbed in each other to notice anything else. They kissed in the parking lot. Not a quick peck, but a lingering, passionate embrace that confirmed every suspicion. But it was what I overheard when I cracked my window that truly shattered me. "When are you going to tell her?" Natalie asked as they stood by her car. "It's complicated," James sighed. 32 years, 2 kids, shared finances. I need to figure out the Mabel situation carefully. The Mabel situation. That's what I had become after 3 decades of marriage. Not his wife, not his partner, not even a person with feelings, a situation to be handled, a problem to be solved. I know, Natalie soothed, stroking his face. "Take the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." "Once the merger completes next month, things will settle down," he promised. "We'll have more clarity on where the new organizational structure leaves us, and I can start untangling things at home." Untangling. As though our life together was nothing but a messy knot hindering his true desires. I drove around for hours after they parted, unable to go home and pretend everything was normal. Rain began to fall, matching the tears streaming down my face. 32 years of memories flashed before me. The births of our children, family vacations, holidays, quiet moments of companionship. Had it all been building toward this betrayal? I recalled moving 6 times for James's career, each time leaving behind my own professional opportunities. I remembered declining a dream position at the National Archives because James's promotion required more support at home. I thought about the countless dinners I prepared for his business associates, the social connections I nurtured to advance his career, the wardrobe I carefully maintained to be the perfect executive's wife. I had slowly erased myself piece by piece, year by year, to fit into the negative space around James's ambitions. And now, I had become so invisible that he could dance with another woman at our anniversary celebration, could plan to untangle me from his life, as though I were nothing more than an inconvenience. The rain stopped eventually, and with it my tears. In their place came a strange crystalline clarity. I was 57 years old. I had devoted my adult life to being James Preston's wife. But I had been Mabel Carmichael before I met him, a woman with her own dreams, her own skills, her own identity. Perhaps it was time to remember her. I drove home after midnight, half expecting to find James waiting up, worried about my unusual absence. Instead, he was soundly asleep, having texted a terse message hours earlier. Meeting running late. Don't wait up. I stood in our bedroom doorway, watching him sleep peacefully while my world lay in ruins around me. In the bathroom mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back, eyes swollen from crying, face drawn with shock and grief. Keep dancing with her, James, I whispered to my reflection. You won't even notice I'm gone. In that moment, an idea began to form. As a librarian and archivist, I understood systems, how information was stored, tracked, preserved. I also understood how it could be obscured, hidden, or made to disappear. I had spent years helping James organize his financial records, knew all his accounts, passwords, investment portfolios. I had managed our family's most sensitive information, been the keeper of all records. What if I used that knowledge not to preserve our history, but to erase my place in it? Not illegally. I wasn't a criminal, but strategically. Disappearing on my own terms, taking with me the dignity James had tried to strip away. By tomorrow morning, I would be completely untraceable, I told my reflection, along with every secret you've tried to hide. The woman in the mirror straightened her shoulders, wiped away the last of her tears. For the first time in years, I felt something like power returning. James had forgotten who I was, what I was capable of. But I was about to remind him, by disappearing so completely that he would finally notice the shape of my absence. The next morning, I woke before James and prepared his favorite breakfast as though nothing had changed. He kissed me absently before leaving for work, his mind clearly elsewhere, with her, no doubt. I love you, he called out perfunctorily as he headed out the door, words that once meant everything but now rang hollow. After he left, I sat at our kitchen table and methodically planned my disappearance. This wouldn't be an impulsive flight. It would be a carefully orchestrated vanishing. First, I made an inventory of our financial entanglements, joint checking and savings accounts, investment portfolios, retirement funds, the house deed, insurance policies. I had access to everything. James had always trusted me to handle the boring paperwork, as he called it. Over the past year, sensing something was wrong in our marriage, I had quietly been preparing for a worst-case scenario. A separate bank account opened in my maiden name with a different bank. Small cash withdrawals that wouldn't raise flags. A safety deposit box containing important documents. It wasn't much, but it gave me a foundation. Now I would accelerate these preparations. I called our family attorney, claiming I needed some documents for estate planning purposes. I visited our bank to update signature cards. I made appointments with financial advisors to review our retirement strategy. At each step, I gathered information, secured copies, and built my understanding of exactly what James had, including things he thought I didn't know about, like the offshore account he'd established 3 years ago, funneling company bonuses away from our joint finances, the suspicious real estate investment in Natalie's name that had been funded through a series of transfers from our equity line of credit, the questionable tax deductions he'd claimed for business expenses that were actually personal luxuries. James had never worried about me discovering these financial indiscretions. After all, I was just the supportive wife who handled routine bills, not the sophisticated financial professional who would understand complex money movements. He had underestimated me, forgetting my meticulous nature and attention to detail. I wasn't planning to ruin him, but I would ensure I had leverage if needed. I copied statements, transaction records, and tax documents, organizing them chronologically into a comprehensive file. If James tried to leave me with nothing after I gave him everything he would find, I had protected myself. For a week, I maintained the facade of normal life while secretly preparing for my departure. I converted selected assets to cash. I researched destinations. I contacted Lisa, a college friend in Seattle, who had remained close despite the distance, asking if she could host a visitor for a few weeks. I didn't explain why, but her immediate Absolutely, told me she suspected. I created a new email account and secured a prepaid phone. I gathered my most treasured personal possessions, photo albums of the children, my grandmother's jewelry mementos that couldn't be replaced. I packed a single suitcase with essential clothing, nothing that would immediately signal my absence. Most critically, I wrote letters to our children explaining my decision without vilifying their father, to our family attorney outlining financial arrangements I expected to be honored, and finally to James. His letter was the hardest to write. How do you summarize 32 years of marriage and its dissolution in words? How do you convey the depth of betrayal without sounding bitter? In the end, I kept it simple. James, by the time you read this, I will be gone. Not just from our home, but from your life. Your actions have made it clear that this is what you want, though perhaps not in this way or on this timeline. I know about Natalie. I know about the Westbrook Hotel. I know about your plans to untangle the Mabel situation after the merger. I've taken only what is rightfully mine. The rest I leave to you, including the consequences of your choices. The enclosed documents detail financial transactions you thought were hidden. Whether they remain private depends entirely on how you handle what comes next. Don't try to find me. By the time you realize I'm gone, I will have ensured that I'm untraceable. Keep dancing with her, James. Now you'll notice I'm gone. Mabel. I sealed this letter along with copies of the incriminating financial documents in an envelope to be left on our bed. The final stage involved my professional skills as an information specialist. I systematically removed traces of myself from our digital life. I unlinked accounts, changed passwords, and deleted apps from my devices. I closed social media accounts or set them to private with false information. I researched privacy laws and data removal processes. I wasn't trying to disappear in the dramatic identity-changing way of thriller novels. I simply wanted to control my own narrative, to determine who could reach me and when. To ensure that finding me would require effort that would demonstrate genuine care rather than mere convenience. I also prepared a special package for James's company board of directors, evidence of his financial indiscretions involving company funds, including his misuse of expense accounts and the questionable real estate investment connected to Natalie. This would be my insurance policy delivered only if James tried to deprive me of what was rightfully mine in a divorce. As my plan came together, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. The life I had known was ending. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years, the future was mine to determine, not merely a reflection of James's desires. The night before my departure, James called to say he would be staying in the city due to late merger negotiations. I knew exactly where he would be spending the night and with whom. It was the perfect opportunity, a full day to execute my plan before he would even realize I was gone. I slept surprisingly well that night alone in our bed for the last time. Tomorrow would begin the next chapter of my life, a chapter where I was the author, not merely a character in someone else's story. The morning of my disappearance dawned bright and clear, ironically beautiful for such a momentous day. I rose early and moved through our home with purpose, touching familiar objects for the final time. This house had witnessed our children's first steps, family Christmases, dinner parties, quiet Sunday mornings. Now, it would witness my liberation. I'd planned my departure meticulously. First, I transferred my carefully packed suitcase to my car parked several blocks away to avoid neighbors' notice. I had withdrawn cash over several weeks to avoid large, suspicious transactions. My new prepaid phone was activated. Temporary accommodations were arranged in 3 different locations before I would head to Seattle. I moved through the house one last time, selectively removing photographs and mementos. I didn't want to empty the place. That would signal anger or vengeance. Instead, I created subtle absences that James might not notice immediately, but would gradually become aware of, like phantom limb pain. I left most of my clothing knowing I wanted to reinvent my appearance anyway. I took only meaningful jewelry, pieces from my family, gifts from my children. James's expensive anniversary and birthday presents I arranged neatly in their boxes on his dresser. I didn't want anything that represented his obligation rather than his love. In our home office, I removed personal files and financial documents I'd need. I left behind neatly labeled folders containing copies of everything relevant to our shared assets. I wasn't trying to hide information from him. I was ensuring I had my own copies of everything important. The letters I had written were placed strategically. The children's letters mailed so they would arrive tomorrow, the one to our attorney sent via courier for afternoon delivery, and James's letter propped against his pillow where he couldn't miss it. As a final touch, I removed my wedding and engagement rings, placing them atop our framed wedding photo on his nightstand. 32 years of marriage reduced to platinum and diamonds on display. At precisely 10 o'clock, I initiated the digital component of my plan. Scheduled emails began deploying to specific recipients: financial institutions, service providers, select friends. Not announcing my departure, but implementing necessary changes to accounts and contact information. By noon, my digital footprint would be significantly altered. The package for the company board was scheduled for delivery Monday morning, but only if James refused to negotiate fairly. I had arranged for a trusted friend to hold it with clear instructions for when it should be sent or destroyed. I wasn't vindictive, just protective. At 11:30, I called our children from my new phone, telling them to check their email tomorrow morning for something important. Both were concerned by my cryptic message, but I assured them everyone was healthy, just that changes were coming they needed to be aware of. I avoided outright lies. They would understand soon enough. By noon, I stood in our foyer for the last time. The house felt both achingly familiar and suddenly foreign, as though it already recognized it was no longer my home. I had composed one final text to James, timed to deliver at 6 p.m., when he would typically be leaving the office, perhaps to meet Natalie again. "Keep dancing with her, James. I'll be gone." Simple, direct, echoing the words I had whispered to my reflection that night. By the time he received it, I would be 3 hours away, my trail already fading. I closed our front door without looking back. The symbolic weight of that simple action, stepping across a threshold I would never cross again, nearly overwhelmed me. For a moment, I leaned against my car, breathing deeply, fighting a wave of doubt and grief. 32 years was a lifetime to leave behind. Then I remembered James's words, the Mabel situation. I remembered how he had danced with Natalie while I watched Invisible and Forgotten. I remembered decades of compromising my dreams for his ambitions. I started the car and drove away from the life I had built, the identity I had constructed around being James Preston's wife. The road ahead stretched into uncertainty, but for the first time in years, it was my road to choose. That evening, from an anonymous hotel room in a different state, I watched missed calls accumulate on my old phone. James, then our children, then friends. I imagined the chaos unfolding as my absence was discovered, as my letters were read, as the reality of my departure sank in. I felt guilt about the pain my children would experience, but I had explained everything in their letters. They were adults who deserved the truth, not a pretense of happy marriage. I hoped they would understand eventually that this was not abandonment, but self-preservation. As for James, I imagined his progression from irritation to confusion to panic as he realized I wasn't simply out somewhere. As he discovered the missing documents, read my letter, recognized that his careful compartmentalization of our marriage and his affair had collapsed. I turned off the old phone for the final time. Tomorrow, I would dispose of it properly, eliminating one more link to my former life. Tonight, I would allow myself one evening of mourning for what had been lost, what had never truly existed except in my hopes. Then I would begin again as simply Mabel, not defined by being someone's wife, mother, or assistant. Just myself, reclaiming the identity that had been slowly erased over 3 decades of putting everyone else first. The immediate aftermath of my disappearance unfolded exactly as I had anticipated. Through carefully maintained channels, I learned that James had initially reacted with anger rather than concern, assuming I was being dramatic and would return after making my point. It took him nearly 2 days to realize the magnitude of what had happened, that this wasn't a temporary absence, but a complete severance. By then, I was hundreds of miles away, systematically implementing the next phases of my plan. Our children's reactions revealed much about their understanding of our marriage. Sophia, our perceptive daughter, called my prepaid phone within hours of receiving my letter. "I've seen how he treats you, Mom," she said, her voice a mixture of sadness and support. "I just wish you told me sooner." Daniel took longer to process the situation. His first loyalty was to his father, the successful businessman he had always emulated, but even he couldn't ignore the evidence I had outlined. "Dad's a mess," he reported during our first conversation a week later. "The company board called an emergency meeting. There's talk about financial improprieties." I hadn't intended to trigger a corporate investigation, but it seemed James's indiscretions extended beyond our marriage. The package I had prepared for the board remained undelivered. James's own behavior had prompted scrutiny without my intervention. Media coverage began 2 weeks after my departure, when the company announced James's leave of absence, pending an internal investigation. Local papers ran stories about the respected executive's sudden professional troubles, eventually connecting them to his wife's unexplained absence. I watched this unfold from the quiet sanctuary of my friend Lisa's Seattle guest house. Lisa asked few questions but provided unwavering support. Her home became my temporary refuge as I began constructing my new life. First came the practical matters: securing appropriate legal representation, filing for divorce in absentia, establishing new banking relationships. I had brought enough financial resources to support myself comfortably while settlements were negotiated. James, facing professional disgrace and personal humiliation, proved surprisingly amenable to fair terms, perhaps hoping generosity might mitigate other consequences. 3 months after my disappearance, our divorce was finalized with minimal conflict. I received equitable division of assets accumulated during our marriage. James retained the house and its burdens. I gained financial independence and freedom from pretense. With legal matters settled, I focused on building my new identity, not in the criminal sense of assuming a false persona, but in the profound work of rediscovering who Mabel truly was beyond her roles as wife and mother. I found a small cottage in a coastal town outside Seattle, charmed by its weathered cedar shingles and garden overlooking the water. The modest advance from my divorce settlement allowed me to purchase it outright, my first independent property investment. Next came the physical transformation, not disguise, but renewal. I cut my carefully maintained shoulder-length hair into a stylish silver pixie cut. I replaced my conservative executive wife wardrobe with clothes chosen solely for my pleasure: colorful scarves, artisan jewelry, comfortable yet elegant pieces that expressed my emerging sense of self. Most significantly, I returned to my professional passion. Using my library science background and savings, I purchased a struggling independent bookshop in town. I renovated it with cozy reading nooks, an exceptional rare books section, reflecting my archivist training, and a community event space. Carmichael's Books and Archives, reclaiming my maiden name, quickly became a beloved local institution. Through the bookstore, I developed authentic friendships based on shared interests rather than social obligations. Book club members, local authors, and regular customers became my community. For the first time in decades, my social circle consisted of people who knew me as Mabel Carmichael, not Mrs. James Preston. 6 months after my departure, I allowed my children to visit. Our reunion was emotional but healing. They had struggled with divided loyalties, but ultimately respected my decision to reclaim my life. Both were shocked by the positive transformation they witnessed. "You seem younger, Mom," Sophia observed, studying me over coffee in my garden. "More alive somehow." Daniel, always more cautious with emotions, simply hugged me longer than usual before leaving. Dad should have seen you, he said quietly. Really seen you. My relationship with them evolved into something more balanced, adult to adult rather than caretaker to dependent. I became mom rather than James' wife in their narratives. They visited regularly, eventually bringing partners, and in Sophia's case, my first grandchild to meet the new version of their mother. Throughout this period of renewal, I maintained strict boundaries around contact with James. All communication occurred through attorneys. I declined his increasingly desperate attempts to establish direct contact, phone calls from unknown numbers, letters forwarded through our children, even a mutual friend dispatched as emissary. I was building something too precious, too fragile to risk contamination with old patterns. My therapeutic journey had helped me understand the codependency that had characterized our relationship, how I had derived identity from supporting his ambitions while neglecting my own. Reestablishing contact too soon might threaten my hard-won independence. 2 years after my disappearance, I began tentatively exploring romantic relationships again. Dating in my late 50s proved unexpectedly affirming. I met thoughtful, interesting men who valued my intelligence, appreciated my independence, and respected my boundaries. I approached these connections cautiously determined never again to lose myself in someone else's narrative. It was during this period that I began writing my memoir, not for publication, at least not initially, but as a therapeutic exercise in reclaiming my story. I wrote under a pseudonym chronicling my journey from invisibility to sovereignty. The manuscript became my way of processing decades of subtle erasure and the courageous act of self-reclamation. Then, almost exactly 3 years after I had driven away from our Connecticut home, James found me. I was arranging a window display at the bookstore when I looked up to find him standing on the sidewalk staring through the glass. He looked older, diminished somehow, his confident posture replaced by an uncertain slouch. For a moment, neither of us moved, separated by glass and years of unspoken truths. When he entered, the bell above the door announcing his presence seemed absurdly mundane for such a momentous confrontation. "Mabel," he said simply, his voice catching. "James." I straightened, grateful for the counter between us. "How did you find me?" Daniel let something slip about a bookstore in Washington. It took months of searching from there. He glanced around the shop. "You've built something beautiful here." "Yes, I have." I felt strangely calm, protected by the strength of the life I'd created. "What do you want, James?" "To apologize, to explain, to ask," he faltered, "to ask for another chance." I studied the man I had once built my life around, the corporate titan reduced to a supplicant. In another lifetime, I might have felt vindication or pity. Now I felt only clarity. "What happened with Natalie?" I asked, though I already knew from occasional updates from our children. "Over within months of your leaving. She was promoted to another division after the investigation." He shook his head. It wasn't what I thought it was." "And what did you think it was, James?" I kept my voice level, professional, as though speaking to any customer seeking guidance. "An escape from pressure, from aging, from—" He gestured vaguely. "From feeling invisible myself." The irony was so profound I nearly laughed. "You felt invisible while I arranged my entire existence around making you visible, successful, comfortable." "I know. I see that now." His eyes, once so confident, pleaded for understanding. "I've lost everything that mattered. My reputation, my position, my family, you." "You didn't lose me, James," I corrected him gently. "You discarded me. There's a difference." He had no response to this truth. "I'm sorry for your losses," I continued, "but I'm not one of them anymore. I'm not yours to lose or reclaim. Can we at least talk properly?" He gestured to the coffee shop across the street. "For closure, if nothing else." I considered refusing, but realized there was nothing to fear from this conversation. I had built an unshakable foundation for myself. Over coffee, I listened as James described his downfall. The company investigation, revealing financial improprieties, beyond what even I had documented: his resignation to avoid criminal charges, his professional ostracism, Natalie's quick departure once his power evaporated. He spoke of therapy, of recognition of his narcissism, of genuine remorse. When he finally fell silent, I shared my own journey, not to justify or accuse, but to illustrate the profound difference between disappearing from someone and finding oneself. "I'm not angry anymore, James," I told him as our cups emptied. "I've found a happiness I never knew was possible. I've discovered that at 57, I could start again and create something authentic." "Is there any possibility?" he began. "No," I said, not unkindly, but with absolute certainty. "That chapter is closed. I can offer forgiveness, but not reconciliation." He nodded slowly, accepting this boundary with a grace that would have been unimaginable in the man I married. "I'm proud of you, Mabel," he said, finally rising to leave. "You became more than I ever allowed you to be with me." "I became who I always was," I corrected him. "I just remembered her." After James left, returning to his diminished life across the country, I stood on the beach near my cottage, watching waves reshape the shoreline with each patient surge. Nature's reminder that erosion can destroy, but it can also reveal hidden treasures beneath what has been worn away. The wisdom I gained through my journey of disappearance and rediscovery crystallized into lessons I never expected to learn in my 50s. That invisibility is partly self-imposed. That boundaries are not walls, but essential definitions of selfhood. That love without respect is merely convenience. That it's never too late to reclaim your narrative. Most profoundly, I learned that sometimes walking away isn't an ending, but the most powerful beginning. That becoming untraceable to those who took you for granted can lead to finally being truly seen by yourself and eventually by those worthy of your presence. 3 years after disappearing from a dance floor where I had become invisible, I found myself dancing through life with a joy and authenticity I had forgotten was possible. Not as an accessory to someone else's success story, but as the heroine of my own unfolding tale. I often think about that moment in the bathroom mirror the night I discovered James's betrayal. The woman who whispered, "Keep dancing with her, James. You won't even notice I'm gone." How frightened she was. How uncertain. How she couldn't possibly imagine the strength and joy awaiting her on the other side of that terrifying decision. I wish I could tell her, "It gets better than you can possibly imagine." The greatest love story of your life is the one you're about to begin with yourself. Have you ever had to walk away from something that was slowly erasing you? What gave you the courage to take that first step? Share your story in the comments below, and if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of transformation. Remember, sometimes becoming untraceable is the first step to being truly seen. Thank you for listening, and may you always find the courage to dance to your own rhythm, even when the music seems to have stopped.